we're talking about the cost of living, but I suspect the cost of caring is going to become very much in the zeitgeist very soon.
This is The Payoff with me, Sylvia Jeffreys. Melissa, welcome to The Payoff. It's lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, Sylvia. It's so lovely to be here.
Well, we've had a number of conversations now on Today Extra. They're all 5 or 6 minutes long though, and I've always been left with more questions to ask. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity today to unpack what you're doing at Violet and to begin with, to look at what started it all for you, because this was born of a very personal experience. With your first husband, Mauro. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yes, it's not uncommon, is it, for the kind of origin story when you move into an entrepreneurial space. It comes from somewhere that really, it changed you, it got you out of bed for a different reason, because I never really saw myself doing any work in this area. I was a career consultant. I set up and ran a number of agencies, but I was running one of those with my first husband, who was from Milan, and if we're going to be technically correct, it's Mauro. But we always just called him Mauro. And, he was running one of those agencies with me, and we were in those really heady first years of marriage. Somehow we had 3 kids, and we had a business and a mortgage, and it was all...
3 kids in what, 3 years?
Kids, no, 3 kids in about 7 years.
Okay,
and the boys were 21 months apart. Yeah. Beautiful, delightful, happy chaos, as you would know. It's gorgeous, but he just hadn't been himself for quite a while, and I noticed that his belly looked really swollen, and it took me a few months to get him to the doctor, as it often does. But he had quite advanced renal cell cancer of the kidney, and that kind of weird belly was ascites, like an advanced response to cancer. So it was just totally overwhelming and devastating. How
long after the birth of your third child?
Orlando was about 9 months.
Wow.
When he was diagnosed. So, yeah, it was really, I mean, I don't really have words for what that period was like. Yeah. And we really struggled through that 15 months of his illness for all the obvious reasons. Like, it's never going to be an easy thing to go through. But what I really sat with after he had died is all the things that really could have been better and should have been better that weren't. So we could never talk about it. We didn't have the words, we didn't have the courage to talk about what was happening to him and to our family. We did no planning. So he died, he left me single, self-employed mother of 3 with no will. And those sides of it were just such a mess. And interestingly, Sylvia, we've called this the cost of grief. Now, I sat really heavily with my grief, but I also felt a bit angry after he had died. I felt angry at myself, angry at him, like really, we should have done better than that. So it got me very focused to start to look at this as my life's work, really, because it's such a human experience.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the cost of grief. And it's very hard at the time to look past the emotion of it, the feelings of grief, the loss, the what now, the gaping hole that someone leaves emotionally for you in your life. What else comes with the cost of grief? How else do you describe that to someone today?
I think about it in 3 ways. And the first is that very palpable human side of grief. It's the sadness, the loss, of the relationships, the people that we've loved and who loved us, the regret that sometimes is part of that. But I think about that, and I often talk about the fact that we just don't plan for this. We plan for all the other life stages and milestones. But this last chapter of life, whether that's someone who's young and managing a life-limiting illness like Mauro was, or that's an elderly person coming to the end of a well-lived life, we don't talk about that chapter of life, and we really should. That's the kind of the first way I think about it. The second is the financial cost of grief. And this is particularly important as we face an ageing population. We will see a 400% increase in people reaching 85 within 5 years.
400%
400%
in 5 years.
In 5 years. So this is analysis that Bernard Salt did with us earlier this year, looking at ABS data. I mean, it is a 5-fold increase. It is huge, and it's going to mean a lot to us midlifers as we love and care for our parents and our in-laws. So I think about the financial cost of caring. We're talking about the cost of living, but I suspect the cost of caring is going to become very much in the zeitgeist very soon.
Well, elaborate a little bit more on that, because, reading your website on that very topic, it says by 2032, the number of Australians turning 85 each year will jump from 12,000 to 65,000.
Yeah, that's right.
2032 isn't far away.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What is this all going to look like for the middle-aged carers?
And even as a society, like, we have never seen this size of demographic shift before. The baby boomers changed everything on their way through, didn't they? We had to build new universities as the baby boomers came through that period of their 20s. So we've never had people living as long, and we've never had the same volume of people reaching, their 80s and their 90s. So what it means for us as a society is there is a lot of informal family care required, and for all the right reasons. These are the most wonderful people who have loved and raised us, and so it's certainly the right thing for us to be talking about and planning for. But we've just run some national research, and it's told us that 90% of midlifers just feel completely unprepared. They're worried, they're overwhelmed, they're unprepared. How are they going to do this? How are they going to keep all the plates spinning? And
unprepared for caring for elderly parents.
To care for their elderly parents, yeah. It is a gendered issue. This issue disproportionately affects women. 2 out of 3 caregivers are women, usually the eldest daughter.
Well, I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. And you
doesn't.
look anecdotally around you, around your family, around the people you know, and more often than not, it is the women in the family who step up and coordinate the care for ageing parents. It's not always the case. But why do you think that is?
I think that is the topic of an hour on its own, because there's a whole social commentary that would sit behind that. And I just want to point out that there are amazing men out there doing this work.
Of course.
There really are. I know a lot of them. My husband's one of them, my second husband, that is. But it is disproportionately affecting women. And I think when we put that in financial terms, that's a real worry. So what we see is this is quite an incremental role. You don't wake up one morning and go, oh, goodness, I'm caring for my mum. It's very incremental. You might start doing a little more shopping, take mum to a few more medical appointments. There might be a fall or some change in health decline, and things start to escalate. So necessarily you step in and do more. And people don't really see themselves as a carer very easily. It's just not a label that we apply. But we see a lot of women then necessarily having to cut back their work hours, step out of the workforce altogether.
So that cuts back their superannuation
has
as well.
Really significant long-term financial consequences, as we know. And it also means it can be quite hard to get back into the workforce because ageism becomes a factor. And if you've been out for a couple of years in your 50s, that can be challenging to find a way to step back in. So it's, there's the human cost. There is this very real financial cost through the lens of caregiving. And the third part of this, Sylvia, is what we call system cost. Now, there is just so much time and cost and complexity around the last chapters of life and grief and loss because we're so unprepared for it. Because we don't do a good job talking about our care preferences, we see a really big misalignment of care in the way that people experience that last 12 months. That's costing our health system billions, upwards of about $8 billion a year in low-value care that's misaligned with people's preferences. And then you look beyond the healthcare system and you think about the banks and the insurers and the super funds who are all dealing with time, cost and complexity because we're not prepared. So it's pretty hidden at the moment, but it's a really important part of how we start to improve things for ourselves and our families and across the system as our population continues to age.
Well, this is one of, like you say, the hidden things that people really deal with in a time of grief is the paperwork. The mountains and mountains of paperwork and administration and all of those hurdles that have to be jumped over at the end of someone's life when you're trying to simply grieve. There's nothing simple about grief, but you should have the space to do it. But a lot of people don't because they're so caught up in the weeds of trying to sort out the paperwork. How many people are prepared for the end of their life?
It won't surprise you. Very, very few. I have a special name for that type of administration. We call it SADmin. The SAD administration. It's unavoidable. You know, we have to do large parts of it, but it's time and cost and heartache heavy. And, I mentioned my husband died without a will. I cannot tell you how many times I had to go in and put his death certificate on the counter in front of a stranger. And that's a horrible feeling. And then I had to deal with their response to that. It's just awful. We should do a lot better than that. But we only have about 11% of Australians with a power of attorney. We have about 40% with a will, which means 60% don't. And even those people that I talk to, that they'll say to me, I'm actually really prepared. I've got my will, I've got my power of attorney. Almost none of them have talked about care preferences. So advanced care planning, about 14% of people have an advanced care plan. Despite best efforts, it hasn't really served us well. And that's really fueling that misalignment of care that I mentioned.
So we'll talk about those conversations because that's really important in a moment. But if we go back to your story, in establishing Violet and through your own personal loss, at what point did you realise, okay, this is a universal issue that applies not only to me at a time like this, and something more serious needs to be done in this space?
I think when I was going through Mauro's illness with him, I was just too caught up to know where to look for help. And that's quite common. We hear that all the time and people just say, I don't know where to start. But as I was kind of reflecting on it after his death, I started to look for that place. I go, well, how do people work this out? This is completely ubiquitous. Where is the help? And I couldn't find it. And I started to think about Beyond Blue and Lifeline and other national organisations that help us with some of these complex issues. Couldn't find it. It's either very clinical or it's very bureaucratic. There is no kind of human response to this that meets people where they are and helps them feel more prepared and have a meaningful plan. So very fortunately, I stumbled across a tiny micro charity at the time that was doing some of this work in a very local setting, and I joined the board and kind of got a feel for who was involved, and then I was asked to take on the CEO role, and I was very interested in doing that on the basis that we started to think about this at true scale. And that's where it kind of started to grow, really.
So what do you do at Violet? How are you helping people to go through this time of life?
We do a couple of things. We have a lot of free information and resources, and last week, and this is what we were talking about on the Today Extra couch, we launched a tool called the Care Compass, which is really trying to respond to that question we know people have, I don't know where to start. This is a safe, easy place to start. That's online at violetcares.com. But we also deliver guided support programs. So the Macmillan nurses and the McGrath breast care nurses, we've got a national network, about 60 or 70 odd volunteer Violet guides. They've all had an experience of caring for someone. A lot of them are retired nurses and things like that. And they're very carefully trained and supported by us, and they deliver support programs over the phone. And wonderfully, that is now funded federally through the Carer Gateway. So it means that there's no out-of-pocket expense for people that are looking for that support.
What have you been most proud of in establishing and running Violet over the years? Because you have enormous reach now.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear. I think that starting to get some traction and some profile and know that this is not a postcode service. This genuinely has to reach every Australian, in advance of them needing us, really. This hopefully will become good grown-up behaviour that we have these plans in place. I think one of the most things I'm proud of was being able to have Kate Carnell join us a couple of years ago. So I knew I needed that transformational chair, and Kate came to this with such a willingness and an openness to try new models. I mean, she's a brilliant chair. She's my greatest coach and critic. Thank you, Kate, for everything. But bring her in and the way we could start to think about this more politically, I felt incredibly proud of that as well.
So having been in this space for a while now, you mentioned wills, you mentioned power of attorney. What are some of the other things that we're often overlooking in setting ourselves up for the future?
Well, there is that little trifecta of a power of attorney, a will, and an enduring guardian. Not enough people know the difference, and not enough people know what happens when you don't have them. So a big part of what we're trying to do is help with some of that education. You can imagine being stuck with a frozen bank account or not being able to access, your assets, not being able to make financial decisions because you haven't got the right things in place, and there might be an unexpected death or even an expected death and things aren't in place. Those three things are incredibly important.
What is the difference between power of attorney and enduring guardian?
Yeah, power of attorney is your financial and legal decisions if you don't have capacity to make them, and your enduring guardian is your healthcare decisions and your kind of lifestyle choices. So they're really important decisions. They're often given to the same person for obvious reasons, but people are confused about them, and again, we just want to provide enough education and make it easy. Make it easy for people to do.
What about life insurance and income insurance? Are they areas that we should be looking at?
I think that's very much about the individual and their circumstances, and that would be financial advice, which would be beyond our remit. But the message is get the information, have the conversations. A lot of people have life insurance automatically as part of their super. You know, they may not know about it, but it is bundled in quite often. So get informed. And particularly if you're taking on that caregiver role, there are incredible programs out there. There is this federally funded program called the Carer Gateway, which is designed to support exactly that experience. Not enough people know about it. So I would encourage listeners who are in this now or anticipate that they might be to really have a look at the Carer Gateway and get some of that coaching and counselling and support.
I guess what's really fascinating to me about all of this is that, ageing is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's coming for all of us, whether we like it or not, and no amount of Botox or filler can stop us from getting us to our 80s and our 90s, right? So why is it still such a blind spot? Why is preparing for the later stages of life still such a blind spot for so many of us? You say almost 90% of us.
Look, I think it remains taboo. When I'm asked this question, because I am asked it a lot, I often point to mental health. So if we were sitting here 10 or 15 years ago, mental health had the same stigma, the same taboo. We didn't have a language for it. We didn't have an ecosystem to support people. And now my kids talk about their mental health over their breakfast, right? It's generationally, it's very different. So I'm very hopeful that we can start to normalise conversations around a stage of life, not just the end of someone's life. Of course, that is part of the later chapters of life, but we're talking about a couple of years here, and we want people to live well until they die. So it doesn't serve us well to pretend that's not happening, or, pretend mum who might be 91 and a little bit frail that she's going to remain as well today as she is. It doesn't serve us well. And I think, we have to give each other a bit more courage, a few more nudges, and have a few more of those open conversations.
If we go back briefly to the sandwich generation again, what does the burnout of the sandwich generation look like? What are some of, you mentioned the financial burdens that a lot of people face and having to step back from work a bit and lose some superannuation. But what is the mental health toll on that generation?
This is really interesting. This was another key finding from our Care Index, the national research. Again, nearly 90% of people, and this is statistically validated research, were really worried about their well-being. They were recognising how drained they were feeling, what it was requiring of them to keep all those plates spinning. Really worried about it. Also really worried about the impact on relationships. So about 75% of people were worried about, what is this going to mean for my partner, my marriage, the relationship with my siblings. I mean, our family systems get reactivated in these circumstances. And then you look at the evidence, which wasn't our research, but exists in other places. About 40% of people have permanent relationship fallout.
Wow.
After they have gone through caring for a loved one through the last stage of life. It's a big number.
That's a big number.
Yeah.
That is
And
a big factor, isn't it?
All sorts of reasons contribute to that, whether that's kind of a lack of acceptance and understanding that that person is reaching the end of their life. There's financial and legal and all that. Stress, conflict, siblings that might fly in from other states at the last minute with a real point of view, disproportionate help and responsibility, a whole range of different reasons. But it really does reignite all those family dynamics.
I think one of the hardest things when you have ageing parents is even just opening the conversation about what they want for the later stages of their lives. And, I think we all want to be careful not to overstep the mark here, and we want to do what's best for them. But language is really important, isn't it? What is your advice to someone who needs to approach that conversation?
For a long time, I think we've been saying to people, just have the conversation. And I think that's too hard. Or I think people might have one attempt at having I'm using air quotes here, having the conversation, and maybe it doesn't go so well, so they never return to it. It's part of the reason why we launched the Care Compass, because it means that, you could sit down and do a version of the Care Compass knowing what you know about your mum and dad, and then use that. It's not binding, it's values-based. Use that to open the conversation with them. We found that was really helpful. But the couple of points I would make is 75 is a really sensible trigger. People go and have a GP check. It doesn't mean that 75-year-old is anywhere near close to the end of their life, but they are entering a different chapter of life. Let's talk about it. Let's start early and gently. I often talk about making this feel like an invitation. Don't make it feel like you're instructing someone or interrogating someone. That might mean they're not quite ready when you are. That's okay. Make it an invitation and come back to it when they're ready.
With what kind of language? How do you make that invitation?
I would say things like, Dad, there's a couple of things that are on my mind. You've just turned 75. I want to do the very best by you in the years ahead. And there's a lot about you that I'd love to understand and talk about. What's important to you? How do I think about what matters most to you in the years ahead? In those conversations, it's really important to be a very good listener and sit with some of those silences. Sometimes we've been taught that silences are a bit awkward, but in those really tender conversations, they're actually processing time and reflecting time and catching up time. This has taught me a lot in parenting too, this particular skill.
Yeah.
Sit on your hands, close your mouth, count to 10, sit with the silence and let that person kind of move to the place that they need to be in that conversation. And the final thing would be to write this down. Use a tool like Care Compass. Make sure these things are captured in some way and share them with the permission of the person you're talking to. Make sure your siblings are aware that this conversation is being had. Or
Don't go rogue.
Don't go rogue. It goes right back to that family conflict piece. Be open, share, make sure everyone is as aligned as they can be. I'm not waving any magic wands, but let's be as open as we can be and then come back to it, because things do change in the later years of life. Age, health, events, things change, and it needs to be a conversation that you feel ready and able to return to.
And what kind of preferences are we asking about?
This has been very interesting in developing this tool called the Care Compass, because for a long time people have been given quite scary forms with a lot of acronyms, and some of them say like do not resuscitate, DNR. I mean, that is incredibly hard to ask people to tick a box without context, without support. It feels technical and legal, and it might just suggest why adoption is so low. So the kinds of values and preferences that we're working with in the Care Compass, we've got a set of 7 questions, which really, what are the things that matter most to you? And out of all of those things, the platform suggests one of 4 care priorities. They're quite obvious. One is I would like full medical intervention. I would like a balanced care approach. I would like supportive care only, or actually I would like to delegate that to my doctors and my healthcare team. And there's a lot of information in the Care Compass about what those things might mean for you. But it's so interesting because over 80% of people are choosing balanced care, and that's not what they're getting in the current health system. A lot of people are getting full medical intervention, which is a lot of low-value care and a lot of non-beneficial treatment, which keeps them in hospital wards, away from their families, and is misaligned with their preferences.
What if you find that if there's someone in your life who is aging, well, we're all aging, but is getting to the later stages and is reluctant to have these conversations, how can you approach that? How can you handle that? Do you just sit back with it? Is there a way to re-engage them, perhaps, in the conversation?
Look, it is not going to be for everyone. There will always be people for a range of reasons, and some of these might be religious or spiritual or cultural reasons, or maybe they've had some kind of trauma that means this is too hard. And I don't think that that's where all the work lies, in really making sure those people do. Let's work with the majority who actually do want to talk about it. And we know that there is a lot of relief, actually, when these conversations have been had. So I think, as I said, start early and start gently and just notice what the response is like. You will know quite quickly if there's an opening. It may not be today, may not be next week. You will also know very quickly if there's deep, deep hurt or fear there. And in some of those cases, you might need to let that sit. There might be another person, better place to have that conversation. You may even need some professional support.
If we go back to your story again, you have spoken about feeling regret over how Mauro passed away and those last months with him. What was at the heart of that regret exactly, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind. I think regret is... it's very powerful. Probably we don't recognise how... It's kind of like the Brené Brown shame vulnerability piece. For me, regret is as palpable. We were both tertiary educated people. We ran a business together. We should have been able to navigate that system better together, and we should have been able to plan for our little family. And we should have been able to make sure that the last 6 months of his life were much better spent. He just bounced in and out of hospital, treatments and surgeries that he should never have had. They made no difference to the outcome of his illness. But it meant that he was lonely and on his own, and he wasn't at home with us, being loved and cuddled and making memories. And that brings me deep regret. And in many ways has become the fuel for this work, kind of the antidote, and I think has helped me process a lot of the experience of losing my first husband, losing the father of my 3 children.
Which is never easy. It's never. It doesn't matter how prepared you are. It's always going to knock you for 6.
Look, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point to make. This is about making the last stage of life the best it can be. It's never going to be easy to go through. We can make it better. But, interestingly, I'm quite a different person as a result of that experience. There are a lot of people talk about this, don't they, the kind of post-traumatic growth piece, but I'm a much braver person. I live much more in the moment. I make decisions with a lot more conviction. So there are unexpected gifts in some of the hardest things.
How old are your kids now?
So my daughter is 22 and I have 18 and 16-year-old boys. But, they were 7 and 4 and 2 when he died. So, yeah, very, very young family at that point.
Do they have ways to honour their dad, ways to remember him and stay with him?
Yeah, we've always tried to make that something that is very open and also not too sad. I learned very early after his death, they didn't want his anniversary or his birthday to be heavy and sad. So we
Yeah.
get pizza.
Yep.
You know, we get Cooper's green pale ale, his favourite beer, and I might make them a little shandy. And we try to talk about the things that made him who he was. And, you know, I've had so many beautiful moments where my boy, my middle son, came out of the bathroom one day holding a razor, and he said, "Oh, Daddy used to use one of these." Like just those little moments, and I never want that to be hushed. And you know, I want to lean into those moments and let them know it's okay.
Yeah. I guess what's really interesting about your career then, Melissa, is that you've really you've driven your career with such a purpose and such a personal purpose. Now, what do you think is the lesson in that for people who might be listening today, who are maybe still trying to find their way into a career that means something to them?
It's not easy. I think there is so much privilege in being able to do work that really means something to you, that gets you out of bed for a different reason, as I said. And I think all of us search for purpose in our work. It just takes very different shapes and forms. I think this idea of perseverance is really important, particularly in the way that we've had to think about scaling Violet. You know, I would love to do this just for the benefit of all Australians and make it available, but you've got to be quite commercial as well. You've got to think about, well, where's the cost currently sitting in the system, and how do we design a business and a product set that starts to reduce some of that cost and bring other businesses to the table. So while we had incredible philanthropic support in the early years, we've had to think about it quite commercially, and sometimes that's an uncomfortable tension when you use this label of kind of purpose-driven work, but it's necessary. I think diversity of thought, diversity of experience, the right kind of leadership, because you are often changing paradigms, trying to change social norms, and that's challenging work and it takes time.
Yeah.
But lean in, as Cheryl would say
Yeah.
a long time
Cheryl,
ago now.
A long time ago.
Lean in.
Yeah. Do you feel that, I mean, a lot of people, when they experience a big loss or a big scare, they, I suppose, reevaluate their priorities.
Yes.
As a working mum, have you shifted your priorities? Have you shifted what your day, your week, your month, your years look like?
I probably had to be very deliberate about that when the kids were very young, because obviously I had to work. You know, I had staff, we had a mortgage, and I had three little munchkins to raise. And I remember thinking quite consciously, if I'm going to be away from my kids, then I'm going to be making sure that I do work that is really meaningful to me and has some kind of measurable outcome. So I do remember in the last agency I ran, I found myself there at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night running a focus group for a pasta company to determine what the pack colour was going to be for their vegetarian range. And it was one of those defining moments
This
where I
isn't
thought,
it.
there's a line. This is it.
Yeah.
And you kind of need those really catalytic moments to muster up the courage. I guess, you know, my dad, he won't mind me saying this, has always been a very hard worker, and I think I've probably inherited some of that. But I do two things. I do try and get the boundaries as well managed as I can, and I also try to really talk to my kids about my work. You know, she's not just kind of away or busy in the study or whatever. I do try to bring them into it and help them understand why it's important to me and to all of us, and how it's, you know, in some ways a legacy to their dad. And I try and involve them. They're all looking for pocket money. So, you know, my 18-year-old does the YouTube edits for the podcast.
Great.
Things like that. Yes.
They can do anything online, those kids.
They will do anything
So
for $20 or $40, right?
And what
amazing.
would take us 3 days would take them 3 minutes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
put
it's
them
good
to
leverage.
work. Put them to work, I say. Has there been a moment where you feel like this has all paid off for you? Like, I've done what I was supposed to do, that it's all coming back around to you, and that you feel like it has been, you know, of meaning?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely been of meaning. I ask myself, am I deeply committed to the work that I do? Every time I answer yes, then I know I'm in the right place at the right time. I don't know how long it's going to take to really get this to scale. But I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity. It's taught me a lot. It's shaped me as a person. I definitely move through the world differently as a result.
If there's one thing that people listening to this today can go out and do, what would it be?
In the context of the work?
Yes.
If you have someone in your family who is 75 or older, have the conversation. Use the care compass. Find a way to start early and gently about a very normal chapter of life that we will all go through. You know, we're going to care for a lot of people in our life. We will care for parents and partners and family members. It's not something that any of us can avoid. So take your small step to do that in your family, and try to nudge that forward.
Melissa, you're doing amazing work, and it's of benefit to so many people who really need it. Clearly, we've got a long way to go to, I think, getting on top of this as an issue in our society. So congratulations to you, and thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Thanks for having me. I've
Lovely
really
to chat.
enjoyed it.